Hi, this is Uncle Matt, and we're here on Uncle Matt's D&D Neighborhood. This is a live show for reasons that I'll explain in a couple minutes. But first of all, my guest on this live show is Mark Taormino. Say hi to everyone.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me on.
And so Mark's there both with his Dark Wizard computer monitor and a cat, so he's all set.
This is my cat, Merlin. Although I should have called him Dr. Acula because he likes to bite all the time like Dracula.
There you go.
But
It's
anyway,
always necessary for evil villains to have a cat. I've discovered that.
yes, exactly. They'll be in a module at some point.
Yeah. Oh, well, Bill Webb's already put his cat into sort of air. So I think, the
Oh,
more
great.
cats in modules, the better.
Yeah, definitely.
So for everyone who's watching, who may or may not know who Mark is, first of all, he is the mind, the creative genius, and the owner behind Dark Wizard Games. And they've recently had a Kickstarter, and I want to talk about Dark Wizard Games. But first of all, Mark and I did not meet as a result of D&D exactly. I'm sure that we got friends on Facebook because of having like 400 mutual friends. I started paying attention to Mark's Facebook posts not because of the D&D side, but because of another very interesting aspect of his life, which is, Mark, that you're an actor, a real actor.
Oh, thank you. Yes, yes. I've been an actor on and off for about over 20 years. And starting way back in 1988 through 94 was sort of my first stint at it. And then, like most actors, you kind of get out of it sometimes and get into like regular jobs, which for mine was software. But then I got back in around 2011, and I've been in it, stayed in it now ever since, and had the most success actually in the last five years or so.
Oh,
So.
that's awesome. Now, speaking of what you're doing recently, you've got a couple of projects that you're working on. One of them is a TV series. Which one's that?
Oh, okay. What it is it's a web series that they'd like to move into TV. It's a web series called Unnecessary Force. I play it's a kind of a comedy web series about like they're like 10-minute episodes about like a spies and like villains. And in the series, I play one of the villain characters. So I'm in different episodes as they continue to move forward. But I play like your token eye patch villain guy in that series. So we shot some of that a few days ago.
Do you actually have an eye
Um,
patch?
yeah. I have an eye patch. It's actually I have a whole stock of all kinds of things like eye patches and weird outfits and things like that I've collected over the years, and I use it in various parts sometimes, or for different auditions I have to go on, or things like that. But in this series, I ended up using the eye patch, and they thought it was a good idea, so they went with it.
And you're also shooting a movie, or just were shooting a movie.
Correct. Thank you. Yes, I'm in a low budget independent feature film. It's about a 90-minute film called Tidy Tim's. It's a comedy it's going to be released in 2019. I'm not sure what the avenue is yet for release, but they do have a release planned. They've done like 5 other films prior to this, and it's a comedy about a used car dealership and the characters that get involved in that. And I play a character named Mr. Onofrio that buys a used car from the car dealership and has some problems with it, and then I have a lot of scenes in that movie. It's actually one of the biggest parts I've had actually as far as an independent feature film, because I'm in the whole thing actually from like page 4 and 5. I get introduced, and I'm back around page 20, then 20, then 30 to 35, and at the very end of the movie around 90 to 95. So I'm throughout the whole thing, and then that's a good fun part. It's
And
a
the
good.
audition story behind that is sort of funny too.
Oh yes, definitely. I originally got called in. See, a lot of times on Facebook, whenever I get an audition, I'll post a picture from whatever they saw that had been submitted by me or the agent. So in the case of Tidy Tim, they had first called me in. They had for the mechanic role. There was a role of a mechanic that's a car dealership, like a greasy mechanic. And they because I have a mechanic picture too. We were talking about different outfits like eye patches and things. I also have a mechanic's jumpsuit as well, which I got from other auditions I had done a few years ago for like Jason Voorhees or things like that, other kinds of parts. But anyways, so I went in for the audition for the mechanic role, and while I was there, I read for the mechanic, and that was fine. And then while I was there, though, I handed them my picture because the only picture I happened to have though was a picture of me with a brown hat and the red tie and the kind of a sleazy look. And when they saw that picture, the director was like, "Wow, this is this is exactly what I had envisioned for the Onofrio character. He's like, can you audition for Onofrio? Can you stick around and read? Which sometimes happens. You go for an audition for one thing, and you prepare for that, and then when you get there like this, they'll say, hey, can you read for this other part too? And then they give me the script. So I said, sure, that's fine. So I sat aside for another 5 or 10 minutes and read the Onofrio part, which is like a Italian guy. The mechanic was like a New Yorker. So the mechanic wanted to look like Brooklyn. Hey, I'm from Brooklyn, whatever. Hey, the car's ready. That kind of New York thing. But then for the Onofrio, I had to switch to like an Italian, like, oh, the car is a lamb. And now what are you doing? Does it have an 8-track player and a cassette tape, an 8-track, with that Italian. But so anyways, so then I sat aside and did the audition for Onofrio. And they're like, wow, that's really great. We'll let you know soon. So then a week later, I got the call for what's called a callback. When you go on auditions for whatever project it is, whether it's a commercial or a movie or whatever, they'll read you the first time, and then they'll have you come back. Then they wheedle it down. They might see hundreds of actors for a given part, especially for some of the bigger projects. In other projects, I've been up against like one part I was up against 400 other actors, and then I got the part, but that was a different thing. But in this case, so they had me come back with a callback, and the callback they've wheedled it down to like maybe a couple other guys, or like maybe 8 guys, 6 guys, whatever it is. And then at that point, I went and did the callback. But that time, I wore the outfit that he wanted because I didn't know until then that that's was the character he wanted me to really read for. So I came with a hat and the outfit and the red tie and read for it, and then they really liked it. And then about a week later, I got the call that said, "Hey, we want you to play the role." And I was like, "Yeah, that's great, thank you." And then we arranged it, and then we shot it a few weeks ago. They started doing initial filming on the project.
So people will want to keep a lookout for a movie called Tiny Tims. It's not out there yet, but that's.
Yeah, I'll send you the link. It's called Tidy, Tidy.
It's Tidy. Okay.
Yeah, it's a little confusing. But I'll send you the link to my IMDb page, and then on there you can see all my credits, including that one.
I think I've already got that one showing in the description of the video, because some of the links you sent me, and this brings us back to why we're doing this live, actually, which is because we already did this interview once. And for whatever, I think it was in between Google and where it went to YouTube, it compressed the entire roughly an hour-long interview into 3 minutes and 41 seconds, in which we were both moving really, really, really fast, and I was not able to parse that back out. And actually, I'm going to check and make sure on the watch screen that we are showing properly. So I'm going to go glassy-eyed, and it does appear, yes, that we're on. So let me get back over to here, and we're good. Okay.
Okay, good, great.
So, and I promise I'll get on to Dungeons and Dragons next.
Yeah, you can ask me anything you want.
But you were on a Seinfeld episode.
Oh, years ago, in my first stint at acting was 1988 through 1994, and what I did was I had got lucky in what's called a silent bit, where you don't speak, but you're interacting with the people. So on Seinfeld, what happened was they needed a few guys that looked like Kramer. So circa, it was like 1992, I think, or 93. I got the call that said, "Hey, we booked on this thing, whatever." So I was okay. So I go down. At the time, Seinfeld was just in its first few years, so it wasn't quite. It was starting to get popular, but it wasn't as popular as it became. So I wasn't quite as familiar with all the characters on it. I knew that at the time that Kramer was like a Jim from Taxi or something. As far as what I
really knew. Accurate, yeah.
That kind of stuff. So what happened? But I didn't know that there was always a door gag with him with coming in a door. What happened was they were doing the episode where Seinfeld gets his own show, and they say they have people auditioning for different parts in the series. Like Jeremy Piven comes in like for playing George or something like that, and then they audition him, and then they go, "Let's see some Kramers," and they have a scene where there's like 6 guys come in the door. They're supposed to be like Kramer. I'm guy number 2 that comes in the door. So they said walk in, turn around, close the door, then turn around again. But they didn't say do the gag, whatever. So I didn't know any better. did exactly what they said. Walk in, turn around. It's like 2 seconds, and I'm gone to the next. But I'm there. You could see me briefly as guy number 2 coming in the door. But a silent bit is basically that. It's where you don't talk, but you're interacting with the main characters or somehow in a critical key part of a scene. So let's say, for example,
it's more than being an extra. It's
exactly at that point. Yeah, it was a little bit more than being an extra because you're sort of featured in it.
Yeah.
So, like for example, let's say they're doing a scene where you and I are the main characters, and let's say suddenly we're at a table like ordering at a restaurant, and suddenly the waiter comes up here, and then we go, "Yeah, give me a ham on rye. Hold the mayo," and then the waiter goes, and then yeah, you would, and he just walks off.
Right.
He doesn't speak, but he's part of the interaction of the scene, like in a special scene. You know what I mean?
Now let's talk a little bit about interactions with a scene, because that's a really good segue now into the modules that you've done, because they're very cinematic the way that you develop them. But again, before we talk about cinematic, since people may not know yet about the modules, tell us a little bit about Dark Wizard Games and about the modules you've written in the Kickstarter you just did, so people can see it.
Okay, thanks. Yes, so Dark Wizard Games is a small press games business that I started. It launched around 2012 with my first module that I had written and published, which is called Hanging Coffins of the Vampire Queen. So see it here. And you can go to www.darkwizardgames.com to see everything.
Which also, I think I have a link to that for people who are watching.
But basically, yeah, it started with doing the first module, the Hanging Coffins of the Vampire Queen, which I ran as my first Kickstarter project. And fortunately, it was successful. And it was able to launch me into being able to create more modules, which I developed after that and ran other Kickstarters. And ultimately to the point now where I have 4 completed modules. There's the second one was Secret Machines of the Starspawn, which is sort of like an homage to Expedition to the Barrier Peaks. And then Villains of the Undercity, which is like obviously a nod to the Slaver modules. And then Vault of the Dwarven King #4, which is like a big epic dwarven adventure. This one I actually wrote with my business partner Alan, who came on board the last few years as far as officially being a partner. And then I also developed this supplement, which is Monsters of Mayhem #1, which is a monster supplement, basically, and which all led to now my 6th book, technically, which is the Kickstarter you're talking about, which is called Maximum Dungeons #5, The Palace of the Dragon's Princess, which is obviously a sort of nod to the Palace of the Silver Princess title. But in this one, it's actually the twist is it's a Rescue the Princess module with a twist where I thought it might be interesting to have a twist where maybe the princess doesn't want to be rescued. Maybe there's a Stockholm syndrome thing going on, possibly with her and the dragon, or the situation where she was supposed to marry a knight that she didn't want to marry, and then coincidentally at that time the dragon attacked the castle because he knew that the castle was weak. Her father, the king, dies. The mother died in childbirth when she was born, and the king and the queen had magical rings that helped protect, like the artifact that would protect everything. But when the queen died during childbirth of the daughter, her magic was gone now because the rings are till death you part. So the king couldn't remarry again. So that sort of weakened the kingdom. And then over the years, the monsters started slowly encroaching, but they couldn't get in. But then finally, on the king's deathbed, when the daughter was 18, he wanted her to marry the knight to carry on the thing and continue the rings to protect the kingdom. But she didn't really want to marry him. But she realized at the very end that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, as Spock would say. So she realized she would go ahead with it to save the kingdom. However,
and before you go on and give spoilers,
okay, yeah, I don't want to give spoilers. Okay.
Let me just jump in and say, don't give spoilers.
Okay.
Because I also wanted to jump back to something that you said, which was that you began with a Kickstarter, which most people don't do. Most people will go out, with something that's in some other venue than jumping all the way up onto Kickstarter. So how was that? How did that first Kickstarter go when it was like the first one you'd ever done?
Okay. Yes, that's a good point. And thanks for stopping me on the spoilers, because sometimes I tend to go too much. But okay. So the first module, I had actually wanted to do retro stuff. First of all, I always loved the first edition modules. Growing up with them and everything, and I always thought it was wonderful things. These books with the stripe and you know what I mean, the stories and all that. And then in around 2001 or 2002, when I saw Goodman Games coming out with the D20 system ones, the Dungeon Crawl Classics modules, yeah, I was like, what? You can actually do this? You can make a module that looks like what a brilliant idea, whatever. You know what I mean? Wow, that's something interesting. And then I realized, you could actually do it and sell them. So I realized, well, this is something. Yeah, if you can actually do this now, I wanted to look into this. And I wanted to do it, but I didn't actually act upon it at the time because I didn't have the right folks involved at the time. Excuse me. But then around 2005, I tried to do a PDF based module all on my own, which never got published, thankfully. Which is sort of my first foray to get to your other point. You know what I mean? What you're saying about jumping right into the Kickstarter versus the other thing. That first little PDF based module was sort of my first foray to like, well, let me try to make a D20 module. And it wasn't quite, it was a good learning experience. And I would recommend that folks, try to do one first without jumping into the big Kickstarter production until you're ready. Because in that first module was a good learning experience, because while there were some elements that moved forward and could carry on into my style with the Mayhem ones, a lot of the other stuff just wasn't there. There was no professional artwork. I was relying on clip art. Big mistake. Don't ever, rely on kind of clip art things. Always get professional artwork made. Things like that, and just other little variants, things that just weren't quite up to par that they would be in my future, endeavors. So unfortunately, I never sold any one of those or actually moved it forward into being public. But then around 2012 is when I discovered Kickstarter, and I started backing people's projects. And that's how I started learning, because I had no connections in the gaming world at all, zero, as far as this world is concerned, with what you guys do, and all of your guys are, in it all the time. You know what I mean? For me, I was like an outsider. People might still consider me that. I don't know. You know what I mean? But as far as coming into that world, and that's when I started backing projects on Kickstarter. I started meeting artists, backing projects like with Brian McCraney, one of my artists, doing his comics, and Jeff D was doing his recreations of drawings.
Right, of the deities and demigods. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. In fact, Jeff was able to get at the time, it worked out really well, his schedule. Jeff D actually did the cover of my first one, which I'm very thankful for.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I didn't notice from the style that it was Jeff.
Yeah, it's a little bit different of a style, but basically, yeah, he did the cover of the very first one, and I was very fortunate for that too. But yeah, and that's how I met all the map makers like Alyssa Faden, who did my first few maps on the.
Alyssa's wonderful. I've done an interview with Alyssa too.
Oh, okay, I'll have to watch that one. Yeah. Because she came on board, because I backed her projects too, whatever was going. That's how I met all the initial folks, and that's when I realized, yeah, maybe I can do this. And then that's why I set up the Kickstarter. But part of the thing with that was just once again not only deciding to do it, but doing it right, and being able to come up with all the professional folks that are going to do this and make it look right, and then coming up with the whole look and feel of the modules, making sure that they look like the original style and play like the original style, but yet are a little unique and modern, but really deliver on what's promised in the descriptions and things like that. Really, that's when I sort of figured out the structure of, as far as things like we were talking about in the other interview, where using box text or not box text, the wandering monsters table, just what exactly is the proper balance of combat and fun and situations and things like that. But my key thing was that I always felt with old modules was having memorable encounters or memorable things. Now, I don't know if they had sort of planned that when they, I don't think they quite did. I'm just speculating that when they wrote the original modules, for like the original D&D modules, certain things would stand out. For example, like in was it Vault of the Drow? There's the thing with the Drow vampire, and he's got the succubus girlfriend.
Yeah.
I think it's either Vault of Drow or
it's one of those three.
one of those.
Because I think it was one that was in the tunnels. That one. So
yeah. Things like that. I was like, wow, that's interesting. But that was kind of like the most interesting encounter in that whole module. You know what I mean? You remember?
Oh, yeah.
So my idea was to try to make the story interesting and unique, and try to build encounters that were all sort of like as interesting and memorable as possible within the whole thing. And not just have to, have just maybe by luck or happenstance. Oh, well, this one was memorable. That, you know what I mean? So I try to write every module where most of the things in there are interesting and somewhat memorable, or slightly, a tweak on something that could be just a mundane, simple throwaway encounter that can actually become something that's interesting.
And so what you're doing, and again, we're both working a little bit from the conversation that we already had, so we know some of the answers to some of these questions. But
right.
So so you're teeing things up in the writing to have a cinematic effect, and you go so for example, just to contrast our styles, you tend to go a little bit further in the teeing up than I do, because I tend to put stuff in there that's got the seeds that I know is probably going to develop into something in the game. And you've gone more in the direction of, for example, the tournament modules, the giants modules, the drow modules, where you have the players approaching something at a particular point in time. So for example, your episode of people walking into the kitchen where the chef is there.
Oh, right. Yes. Yes. In Vault of the Dwarven King, and here's another example of like what we're talking about, a throwaway encounter. Now, to your point, I am trying to balance it so that it's not so specific where there's not enough for, like what you're saying, for it to go its own way.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying it's not a railroad. What I'm saying is that you've got the seeds that you put in just tend to be more developed.
Yes, exactly. And that's why, and that's another thing. In every book I make and every product I make, I'm always trying to improve my skills as far as, writing and making these things happen like that. But what we were saying was, okay, so like a typical, like even like a throwaway encounter, like your typical encounter, like, oh, what, you go into a kitchen. So for example, in Vault of the Dwarven King, there is an encounter where there's a kitchen, and then next to it is the mess hall, your token kitchen and mess hall encounters, which normally like throwaway encounters. You go in the kitchen, oh yeah, the kitchen's all busted up, usually everything's broken, tables are overturned. Oh yeah, the mess hall things are broken, tables are overturned. That type of thing. But in this case, I thought, well, how can we make it a little bit different and actually make something happening there? So in Vault of the Dwarven King, at one point you go into the kitchen encounter, and suddenly when you walk into the kitchen, the characters walk in the kitchen, there's a goblin chef, and he's like all like in a panic. He's like, oh good. It's like a Three Stooges episode where in every Three Stooges suddenly the characters come into some situation where now they're butlers, or now they're doing something, or now they're performing some job that, you know what I mean, what's up. So in this case, he's like, oh, you must be my new waiters. Quick, put your aprons on. And he'll give them aprons. And if they go along, of course they can attack and kill them if they want. That's all fine. But they go along with it. He's like, good. He gives them the aprons. He's like, okay, in the next room is all the monsters, and they're really mad. They want their food and they're hungry. So the characters can play waiters going into the play waiters going into the and then they go into the mess hall where all the monsters are all like eating. And then the monsters the joke is like they're like bickering petty customers. Oh, the food's cold, let's send it back, or oh, maybe whatever. But if the player characters play along with it, they can pick up information like, oh, the monsters say they're going to attack this thing, or there's some piece of information they can find, things like that. But I thought it was a funny little joke in there where you could do that type of thing. In fact, also in Palace of Dragons Princess, there's a similar type of situation where the player characters there's a cult, there's a dragon cult that's taken over the ruined castle, and at one point the player characters come into a room, and there's a guy that's Torgo, the satyr, where he's like, oh, good, you must be the new recruits for the cult. Here, put your robes on and come into the, into the ceremony or whatever.
Yeah.
So then they come and infiltrate the ceremony. And there's like a Mola Ram type ceremony or something that they infiltrate and get in there and do whatever. But
So
little
both,
things like that where, just kind of anything that you can do to just to kind of tweak it a little bit.
yeah. Well, so, and what's nice
like,
about those
Undercity, there's a thing where it's like there's a bathroom thing, like we go in and there's like a bathroom type thing or something with all the little toilets or something like medieval toilets. And when they go in there, suddenly there's one guy, some NPC, like sitting on the toilet. He's like, "Oh, hi, I'll be done in a second. Then we can shake hands like proper people." he gets up, he tries to shake their hand, and if the player characters won't shake his hand, he's forever suspicious of those player characters or something like that. But they'll join the party. But anyways, just little side things that whether they're small or big. I always try to throw in something. In fact, I need to throw in just more generic empty rooms, just so people can rest sometimes. Is what I need to put in, like just a plain empty, which would freak them out. Actually, there's one room that's just totally empty. There's nothing in there, but people are so used to there's something happening all the time. They're terrified just to go into the blank room.
right.
There's nothing that can go on there.
Now, one question that we've got on the chat, James Shields is asking, what happens if they don't play along with one of those situations?
Well, if they don't play along, that's fine. The DM can do whatever he wants. In fact, in every module, right at the very beginning, I'll tell the DM that do whatever you want. You know what I mean, as far as whatever way you want to play it. That's not a problem. So if they don't play along, that's all fine, because they can go ahead and attack or do whatever they want to do. Is fine too. So
right.
There's never anything where they actually have to do a specific thing. But it's
right.
there in case that they want to.
They're because you're not talking about sequences of events. You're just talking about saying what that it's sort of magically when you come into this room, that is also when the chef comes in, and that's so just establishing the timeline rather than having the DM tracking, here's where the chef is going. Oh, does he come in there? It's
exactly because they could also enter the room from the other end too. At that point, they could have walked into the mess hall with all the monsters and they could have got attacked or whatever would have happened too. So,
right.
Yeah, definitely. I always right there in the beginning, like in the DM notes, that says, hey, if you want to alter the thing or run it any way you want, that's fine too. So yeah, definitely. It's just sort of, I just try to give them enough tools in the toolbox to have stuff to work with, so the DM doesn't always have to just sit there and try to think of some elaborate situation or some weird thing to happen. These are some suggestions, but if they want to do their own thing, that's fine too.
Right. So that I think that sort of covers what other signature characteristics, because what we're really talking about here is that you've got sort of an approach that makes the Dark Wizard stuff identifiable. I mean, you can look at it immediately and read a little bit and you're like, okay, this is one of the this is the sort of cinematic approach, and you've got various things that tend to be in common between the different adventures. Any other things about, cinematic is what I jumped on, because it's always fun to sort of look at how do DMs work in the drama in the things, and you've got a sort of a different approach for doing it than I tend to do, and so that was really interesting to me. Are there any other characteristics of them that are maybe less big than that, but that characterize Dark Wizard Adventures?
Okay. Yes. Thanks. Yeah. Definitely. In each of these adventures, I always usually have a very clear start point and end point, as far as there's usually a over the top villain at the end that you have to defeat, because it's always best to make it clear to the player characters at the very beginning of the game, this is your objective. You know what I mean? That's the bad guy. Even though it's simple, you're just, because otherwise a lot of times people can meander. In adventures, like, what I mean? Well, who am I supposed to really kill? I mean?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because a lot of people write one in which part of it is trying to figure out who the villain is, and it may be ambiguous, it may not be clear. And so once again, there we're talking about sort of two different types of adventures. There's one where it's a mystery, and there's one where it is it might be more or less straightforward, but they're not going to end up making a wrong decision about right and wrong or what their objective is. That part of it you establish for them clearly, and then they go from there toward that objective.
Right, exactly. This way, it sort of solidifies in their mind, like, okay, that's the bad guy. I need to get that guy ultimately. You know, like in Vampire Queen, it's the Vampire Queen, or in Star Spawn, it's the Star Spawn. In Undercity, it's Wendell Hobblefoot, which is it's the halfling guy that's in charge of the Undercity. In Dwarven King, I don't want to give spoilers, but it's I mean, there's a guy is in Dwarven King as well. And in the princess thing, it's obviously the dragon and I don't want to give away spoilers, but there's other individuals there too.
And then the
Yeah,
dragon one is not available right now, but the others are if people go to your website.
correct. All the other modules are available in print and in PDF from my website. And right now, Dwarven King, the print version is on back order, just because we're going to do a new print run of that, and we're taking pre-orders of that basically right now on the website. The Dwarven King reprints will happen in the next few weeks or so. We've been updating the booklets and taking care of typos that weren't fixed properly or other little things. So we are going to get that new reprint. But basically, everything's available in print and in PDF form via the website as well.
And I think that you're on RPG Now as well, but I did not put the link to RPG Now down there. People may or may not know, but I love RPG Now. It's a great service to the community. But if what you're specifically trying to do is to support a publisher, RPG Now does take a commission. So getting it, if you're going to go and take a look at some of these, go directly to the Dark Wizard site, and that way Mark doesn't end up paying the commission to RPG Now. It all goes into his pocket.
Oh yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, because they can the website will Dark Wizard website will deliver the PDFs immediately after you buy them. And if you buy the print versions of the books, you still get the PDF version as well. So if they buy the print versions of the books, they'll immediately get the links to download the PDFs as well, and not physically mail them.
At Frog God, that was one of our real big difficulties, was how to do that, because we started out, basically traditional publishing, and then it was like, well, okay, so that means we need some real computer logistics in here to make sure that someone has an account that we can deliver the PDF to and know that we need to do it when they buy the book. So I think your background as a software engineer probably came in pretty handy there.
Oh yes, thank you. Yeah, in this case, I ended up just because normally as a software person, I'm like, well, I'm gonna do it all myself and do it all like super complicated. But in this case, I chose to I looked into like using like WooCommerce. And
Yeah.
WooCommerce actually with my website, the Dark Wizard site is all done in like PHP and like standard programming. But the store front end that I updated recently is just a WooCommerce shop. And WooCommerce actually handles all that for you. They can do the thing where it will automatically deliver the PDF and provide the shopping cart system and things like that. And then you pay via PayPal, and that's all great. In fact, there's also on the website is T-shirts are available too, like this one or various other shirts.
You have to stand up a little bit so we can see the T-shirt, because there you go. All right.
Okay, there you go.
Dark
So
Wizard
T-shirts
Games
are available too on there, with the logo or with different images from some of the characters from some of the modules, and that's all once again delivered also through it works with the shopping system and a company that actually will print makes the T-shirts on demand as soon as you order a T-shirt, goes right through the T-shirt company and they automatically send it out to you immediately. So yeah, definitely with that it's all working out well with the website and the fulfillment there. So yes, you had mentioned what else makes them unique, the modules.
Sure, but if you run out of ideas, that's cool. But because that's one of those ones that's really, really hard to answer, because you're like, okay, well, what
Yeah, well, basically in every module I try to make it, like I said, interesting and have different things, and then the villains, the main villains and the sub villains and all that. And I've been trying to add in a little bit more interactions between the characters that are in the modules, rather than like in the typical old modules. It's just like, oh, there's Viewmaster Toad, and he's this guy that rides up and it's the end of him or whatever. You know what I mean? Like you don't know anything about him or anything, whatever.
Right.
So in mine, I've been trying to as I go along, as I mention little characters, like especially in Villains of the Undercity, um, all these guys here that are the villains, the main villain guys. I put in all just kinds of little details about them so that they all have like inner turmoil, like Snoot here, the bugbear, and Lethos, the lizard man, are constantly at odds as far as trying to make sure their pecking order is higher in the chain of, you know what I mean? They're untrusting of each other. Then the woman character and the wizard are she's trying to get more of like a relationship with him, but you know what I mean? You're all like there's all little details of like things going on. You know what I mean? That just hints at it, but just to give the DM a little bit more stuff to work with. You know what I mean? As far as when they play out when they actually do like role playing things.
Yeah, because
So things like that.
that can become crucial when you've got um, when you've got the players talking to, you know, a villain that they either capture or get isolated, and they can use that information. You know, well, a lot of what you've described is ways where you tee up not just the cinematic role playing, but also the ability for the characters to gain information about what they're going to be running into.
Right, exactly. Yes, exactly. So I've been trying to work that in even more in each future module as well. Definitely. One other thing too that I try to do in some of these that's a little bit unique and different is sometimes there's a little mini game, if you want to call it that.
I
For
love those.
example, like
I
in
love those. Yes.
yeah, and it was hard to figure out how to quite do it, but like in Starspawn here, um, there is a an encounter where there's like a oh, here okay, so in here there's an encounter here where there's like a raceway and it's like speeder bikes like in Star Wars,
Uh-huh.
but it's like an arena where there's all the monsters, all the little green men, the monsters like in the stadium, and it's like a circular track, and the players come in. It's the same one of those same sort of similar things. They're like, oh, well, the guy, the main alien guy rides out on his little speeder bike. He's like, I challenge you all to a race with the speedy bikes or whatever. So then suddenly, like however many player characters there are, suddenly that number of speeder bikes will suddenly appear. That they get on them and then they race the alien and his crew like like a race thing. It's all structured with like some little mini rules I had to invent, like with dice rules and other various things, factors of your strength or whatever. And and then based on that, you race or have the little encounter thing happen there, and whoever wins the whole thing is the winner, and then whoever loses, all the guys in the stadium come swarming down and rip them all apart. So if the player characters win, then the alien guys that were the guys that challenged like what, and then the monsters come in and tear them apart. If the player characters win,
That's
but
awesome.
that's another thing that's fun too with these is I'll not only make it brutal for the players sometimes, but also for the characters within the story themselves can be turned around on them. For
Uh-huh.
example, in Vampire Queen, there's the arm wrestling Minotaur sequence where you come in and there's all the monsters like at a table like arguing, and there's a Minotaur boss guy like arm wrestling some guy. And as soon as you player characters walk in, the Minotaur like beats the guy and rips his arm off and throws it in the pile with all the other arms. And he says, "I challenge you to the arm wrestling." And if the player characters arm wrestle him,
Uh-huh.
then if the player characters win, then the same thing. Suddenly, all the monsters will stop cheering for the boss guy, and they'll be like kind of confused a little bit, and then they'll just dog tackle attack the Minotaur himself and kill him, which gives the players a chance to escape.
Now,
So it
and
goes
sort
either
of
way for the comedy of the brutalness of things can happen either towards the players or even towards the NPCs and the monsters within the stories themselves to be funny.
right. No, that's great. You also got one of the comments on the chat was somebody who was saying it's good to see the interactions between the monsters. You know, setting up the ability to know what the factions are, or whatever the interpersonal things. Because he says that occasionally gets lost in hack and slash type
Right,
modules. So.
right. One thing too on that note was in Dwarven King, I wanted to have a mine car situation because if you're going to have dwarven mines, there's going to be dwarven mine cars. So I thought, well, gee, I don't remember there ever being any kind of a D&D module, especially from the old days, that was really specifically dwarven based, like a dwarven adventure. But not only that, but something that had like the minecart situation. So we set up a whole map with the minecart tracks so that you could actually get in a minecart and like ride. And there's similar thing with the speedy bike thing. There's rules that apply to how the minecars travel and what distance they can go, and there's a whole
Right.
map to it, to the thing, and all kinds of little encounters that you can get. So you could ride the minecart to get to a certain point in time, get out and do something, and you'll get on it again or something like that. But I thought it was funny that to structure the minecart thing almost like a Disneyland ride. So when the player characters get to the boarding stage, suddenly
Mhm.
it's like a roller coaster, like a theme park. There's like a platform, and the mine car thing pulls up, and in it are skeletons of the previous party. That was in like I have the whole picture drawn. Actually, let me see if I can find it here real quick. Yeah, there's a whole thing here where it's funny where
This ain't gonna end well.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, here we go. Exactly. So here you can see it here. The player characters get
Yeah.
to the boarding stage,
Oh, hang
and
on,
here
hang
are
on.
all
I
the
need to click a thing. Okay, keep holding that up. So there, it's gonna fix on you.
okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So they get there, and it's like a boarding stage, and all the other things are. And there's a little guy there that's the this guy, Mr. Sprinkles,
Uh-huh.
and he'll tell them like an attendant, like, be sure to keep your hands and arms inside the car at all times, like at Disneyland or something. And then they get in. If they get in, he'll push the thing, and then suddenly they go off on the tracks or whatever, and start that part of the adventure going down the mine. And once again, of course, during that, they'll come up upon secondary tracks that have goblins in it and things like that. That's where this thing comes into play here, where you can see the fighting.
Wheels. Oh yeah, the goblins fighting. I saw the
Yeah, the
goblins just
goblins
now. Yeah.
fighting them. And also in this one too, Dwarven King is the first one where I actually had two removable covers. So in Dwarven King, you've actually
Oh,
got a separate one here that has the minecart system on it too. And
okay.
then you can use these like a DM screen because
That's
they're dual
really
colors.
awesome. And anybody who doesn't know, that's a major expense on the publisher's part, to go ahead and get those things. And it's a real sort of step up with those. It is not easy to get the removable maps done. It's not how the printing operates
Right,
normally. So kudos to you for that. That's a really nice touch.
right. Thank you for that. Yes, definitely. I was fortunate that my printing company could do it. But you're right. Yeah, it is tricky to get all that done. And yeah, so it's and another after the princess module, the next module number 6 is going to be a big epic adventure, and that one we're going to have 3 removable covers. So there'll be the main one, and then 2 other ones. It's going to be so big that you could have them all like as a huge DM screen around you in that particular module when it's coming
Uh-huh.
out. But yeah, definitely. Um, so yeah, it's interesting, and it's fun, and I just want to make the adventures so that the people can enjoy them and
Yeah,
you know
it's always a labor of love doing these things because, the financial rewards are not anything like commensurate
right,
with the amount of work that's done.
right, exactly. Because it's such a niche market, it makes it so difficult. Like my first Kickstarter only raised like 2,700, for
Yeah.
the Vampire Queen. Well, I had asked for 2,500 at the time. And it's a good thing too that I only asked for 2,500, because at first I was like, well, maybe, because when I'm doing all the calculations of what it's going to cost or whatever, maybe I should go with $5,000. Like, I think I can do it for less. So I said 2,500 on the first one on Vampire Queen, and it made like 2,700 or something like that. Just barely made it.
Yeah.
So after that, I realized, well, okay, I know that the next one will probably be successful too. So let's just put the number a lot lower, because I know that regardless, I can still somehow do it. So after that, I set the goals to be about 500
Mhm.
for them, and instantaneously, funding, and they started growing slowly over time. Whereas number 5 here has been the most successful with what it reached as the goal in Kickstarter.
And that's the
Um,
one you just finished, but you mentioned you've got another one coming, the one with the 3 removable covers. Do you have an estimate on when you're going to run that Kickstarter?
that one is probably going to be towards the end of this year. because we want to make sure that we finish the number 5 first, and that number 5 we're hoping that we can get it wrapped up here in the next 3 months. So maybe in the next 6 months it might launch
Okay.
that one, and that's gonna be a big surprise. It's a big, huge thing on that one for everybody
Okay.
that'll
So don't do any spoilers then.
I want to do the spoilers, but Alan was telling me not to do spoilers on it. What it is, I started this myself, and then Alan is my business partner. That he does all the graphic design, like the InDesign work and coloring of the covers when they're doing, like Jeff D colored in his cover because I was painting, but all the other covers are all done digitally with computer coloring. So Alan does all that. And then over the last 6 months, we made a formal arrangement to be business partners in the company. So yeah, so we have all kinds of stuff planned. Alan also wants to do like a starter kit for everybody that's not familiar with. Because one of the problems is I always just assume, because I grew up with it, you grew up with it. You know what I mean? That everybody knows what D&D is.
Yeah.
Everybody knows what role playing is, and that's not the case. A lot of times, people don't know what it is. So Alan wants to do like a starter kit, like type thing. In fact, in the Palace of the Dragons Princess module, that was their our first box set. So in that one, we actually were able to make a box. I don't have it with me right now, but we were able to make a box, and it looks all professional. It's done by a professional company. So the box set in Palace of the Dragons Princess will be a nice addition, so that people can put all their books in one box and things like that. But in the very next one too, there'll be another box set with that one, the number 6 one, as well. So ultimately, yeah, everything's getting better and better. And we like I said, we want to do the starter kit at some point. And with that one, I will do a 0 level module as well. I will write like a like a Village of Hamlet type of thing or something like that. And it'll be also listed as module number 0, so it'll fit into the canon of all the other modules 1 through 5 through 6, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Okay, so
one thing that was to note too, when you're talking about creating these things and how to design them and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that was part of the design process when coming up with the very first one was because I wanted things to kind of be like sort of like not like an R-rated type thing or PG-13 type concepts in the modules, because there's a lot of violence and other kinds of things that are mentioned, like the high bottom leaf,
right.
Smoking of like high bottom leaf, stuff like that. So I came up with the joke of having kind of the like the mature warning logo or something.
Oh yes.
Which says puzzle and traps, violence, blood, gore, adult language, blah blah, things like that. Now once again, there's nothing in these things that's beyond like a PG-13 or an R-rated type of situation.
Right, but it's a lot of fun to do the warning,
filling up space and things like that. But one thing was on the back of the modules, especially in the beginning. Normally you'd put your other modules here. But the very first one, we didn't have anything. So I was like, what are we going to do to fill space here? This is one of the things that makes the Maximilian ones different than the other modules. Is I go, well, how about what if we have the quotes like from the pre-generated characters in the module that are lamenting about different encounters that they went through in the module. So like, they're like, like lamenting about something, you know what I mean? Like in Starspawn, one of the quotes is like, boy, I sure had fun in that speedy bike race. Damn shame what happened to the losers being ripped to shreds like that. I hope I can find a new party of adventurers to try it again with, like as if all those guys got murdered or something with the thing. But there's kind of funny quotes like that to fill space in the back. And it actually worked out really well because we carried it over through all of them. And we're still able to put in all the other modules too at the bottom here. But once again, it just, and the thing that was invented out of necessity, and it became sort of like a trade dress or whatever you want to call it, and as part of the look and feel of, you know what I mean? And
it's characteristic.
Different than the other modules, things like that. So, but once again, just all invented out of necessity from, what are we going to do to fill space? Oh, let's invent this thing. Oh, that actually became something that is funny to include.
I think all of us that wandered into D&D publishing have got things that either showed up by accident or you just never know where the stuff's going to come from.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well
So yeah,
let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and wrap it up, Mark. Go ahead and say goodbye to everybody that's out there watching.
okay. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks again for having me.
And I will say to everybody, no matter what kind of Dungeons and Dragons it is that you play, imagine the hell out of it.